We've already lost the signal. Okay. Okay, we have signal, yeah.
Are we live? Okay. Hello, everybody. I know that not many people are there yet. We're going to give you all a chance to tune in. I think we still have a few moments before 11 o'clock. But in the meantime, I do have some jokes that are appropriately themed for today's class. So what do you call a fish with no eyes? Yes. Why are there fish at the bottom of the ocean?
Taking a nap?
They dropped out of school.
Oh my.
Where does seaweed look for a new job? The
This-
kelp wanted ad. What is the most popular TV show in the ocean?
SpongeBob SquarePants?
That's a good guess. Whale of Fortune. What did one ocean say to the other ocean? Nothing. What's it?
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Why are clams bad at sharing?
Mr. Clammy?
Because they're shellfish. I don't know if I have any more. What's a pirate's favorite letter?
Arg.
The C. Oh my goodness.
Thanks for that, Alex.
Why was the dolphin sad? His life had no purpose.
Oh,
It's okay, it's just a joke. It's not about a real dolphin.
you're right.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Alyssa. I'm one of the naturalists here at the Barrier Island Environmental Education Program. This morning we are going to be covering some of the curriculum from our Seining class. And if you are unfamiliar with Seining, it's where we take a giant net, we drag it through the water here, and we see what we can catch. And of course, as you can imagine, most of what we catch are fish. So I have my bluegill friend here today to help me out. We're going to talk a little bit about the characteristics of fish, what make them different from other animals, and then we'll actually go seining and see what we can catch. So, like I said, this bluegill here is going to help me out. I want you guys to go ahead and start thinking, and you can use him as an example of things that you need to be a fish. Everybody take just a few minutes. You can say them out loud at home if you want to. And I'm sure, I know you guys are sharp, so I'm sure lots of you guys right away said scales. And you're absolutely right. Our bluegill here is completely covered in scales. And scales are an important characteristic of fish. Scales are like armor for our fish, so it covers the entire body, protects it from predators that might want to grab onto this guy. In addition to having that hard covering, scales are also often slimy. So the fish actually produces a mucus all over its body, kind of like what's in your nose, and it protects the fish from bacteria and diseases entering its body. Another thing that fish must have are fins. So you can see our friend here has lots of different types of fins. And if you want to know about the different kinds of fins, don't worry, I'll hook you up later and we'll talk about the different types of fins. Hook you up.
That's a good pun.
Types of fins and what they do for the fish. Fish also have gills. So you actually can't see the gills on the bluegill right here, but you can see the covering over his gills called the operculum, and that's actually how he gets his name. That operculum covering right there, and then further down, can you guys see how it kind of loops down like that? So the operculum is a bony covering that actually protects the gills of the fish, and the operculum is kind of like our rib cage. So we use our lungs to breathe, but you want to protect the things that you breathe with. So our lungs are inside of a rib cage. Similarly, the gills right here of our fish are underneath an operculum, which is kind of like a cheekbone to protect their gills. They'll breathe water in through their mouth, push that water across their gills, and that will actually allow them to pull oxygen out of the water. Another important characteristic that fish have to have is something you can see if you zoom in just a little right here and come closer. You can see that there is a line running along the body of our fish. That's called the lateral line, and the lateral line is very important for fish, especially little fish that might be trying to get away from predators, because it's basically a motion detecting system. So this line actually has cells all along it that allow the fish to detect movement in the water around it. So if there is a larger fish or predator coming close, the fish can actually detect that movement and get out of the way. It's probably the reason if you've ever tried to catch a fish with a net at the beach, they always seem to be just a little bit faster than you, just a little bit ahead of you, because they can actually detect that movement in the water and get themselves to safety. Another important characteristic of fish, and now this is one you can't actually see, is that they are cold-blooded or ectothermic. So ectothermic is the proper scientific term, and you'll learn that we like to use the normal scientific terms instead of the common names because, believe it or not, we're all scientists right now. Ectothermic means cold-blooded, which means that this guy cannot control his own body temperature. His body temperature depends on the temperature of the water or environment around him. Unlike us, so we are mammals, and mammals are warm-blooded. The word we use for that is endothermic. And our bodies are capable of controlling our body temperature without any help from the outside environment. So for example, if your body is too hot, you probably sweat. If your body is too cold, you probably get chill bumps and the hairs on your arms and legs stick up to help trap heat around you. So this guy does not have any ability to do that. He's ectothermic and he has to rely on his environment for his body temperature. Another thing that you cannot see, but there is inside of this fish, not this one, I think he's just full of stuffing, but inside of fish is what we call a swim bladder. And a swim bladder is basically like a balloon inside of the body of the fish that will fill up and allow it to float or sink, so go shallower or deeper in the water. And one last thing that he does have that you cannot see is very important. It's actually his backbone. So he does have a skeleton inside of his body, giving him structure, giving him shape, and he is a vertebrate for that reason. He falls into the category of animals that are vertebrates, which means they have a backbone. The reason I like to point this out is because there are lots of animals that have the word fish in their name and they're not actually fish. So can you guys think of any, do a little brainstorming and see if you can think of some animals that might have the name fish in their name, but they're not actually fish. So one for me that comes up almost immediately is jellyfish. We do have a lot of jellyfish that wash up on our beach here, but of course, not only do jellyfish lack a lot of the characteristics that we just talked about, they don't have any bones at all, so they certainly can't have a backbone like a fish. For that reason, I like to call them jellies, just so we don't get confused. Another animal that has the word fish in its name and is not a fish is a starfish. Starfish do also lack a lot of these characteristics like fins and scales, but they are also invertebrates. They do not have a backbone. So another word you could use for starfish is sea stars. And one more, one of my personal favorites, I think they're delicious with a little bit of Old Bay, steamed up, are crawfish. Crawfish are also invertebrates, which means they do not have a backbone, they lack a lot of these characteristics, and so they're not actual fish. So don't let those names confuse you. To be a true fish, you have to have the characteristics that we have talked about. Speaking of animals that sometimes people can get confused on whether or not they are fish, we have lots of animals like this in our estuary and off the coast here at the Atlantic, and that would be dolphins and whales. So a lot of people look at them and they think, well, they swim like a fish, they live in the water, they have fins, they must be fish. But there are some important distinctions to make. So I want to test your knowledge. Since we've talked a little bit about what makes a fish, I want to see if you guys know the difference between fish and marine mammals like dolphins and whales. So I have some cards I'm going to get in just a second that have different characteristics on them. And if you think that this characteristic applies to fish, say it. If you think it applies to marine mammals, say it. You can just say it out loud at your house. If you think it applies to both, so keep that in mind, there could be some characteristics that apply to both fish and marine mammals. Say that as well. Alrighty. So the first one here, start off with an easy one, hopefully. Have fins. So do you think that having fins is something that applies to fish, something that applies to marine mammals, or something that applies to both? If you said both, you are correct. Both fish and marine mammals have fins. Although when we talk about marine mammals, a lot of times you'll hear us refer to them as flippers. All right, next one, have gills. Think that refers to fish, marine mammals, or both? Excellent. It does apply to fish, and as we already talked about, fish breathe with gills. Marine mammals are mammals just like us, so they breathe with lungs. They breathe air with lungs, where fish breathe water with gills. All right, here's an important one. Have backbones, or the word we like to use for that are vertebrates. So you think fish are vertebrates, marine mammals are vertebrates, or both? And it is both. Both fish and marine mammals are vertebrates. They have backbones. Ooh, here's a good one. Move their tail up and down. Who do we think that applies to? So I know we haven't talked about the fins of the fish yet and how they move, but this applies to marine mammals. They will move their tails up and down, and fish will move their tails side to side. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments. All right, live in water. I think that's fish, marine mammals, or both. It is both. This is an important one because we know fish live in water. They have water to breathe. But marine mammals are special from other kinds of mammals because of this. They live in or near the water. So even though we as human beings are mammals, and we might like to go swimming in the pool, or we might like to lay out at the beach, we do not live in the water, so we can't be considered marine mammals. We're just normal mammals. Let's see, got one more. Have a swim bladder. Is that fish, marine mammals, or both? And if you said fish, you are correct. Fish have a swim bladder. Marine mammals do not. In order to float up or sink down, they actually have air in those lungs that they can use a lot like the fish use the swim bladder. So excellent job, everybody. So as promised, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about the different fins that fish have. So the first one I'll start with is one that I think a lot of people already know about, and it's this fin here on the top. If you ever see a shark fin sticking out of the water or a dolphin fin, you know that this is called the dorsal fin. It's the top fin. The dorsal fin has an important job. It's balanced out by a fin here on the bottom called the pelvic fin. And the dorsal fin and the pelvic fin have an important job of keeping the fish upright in the water. So a fish doesn't want to be swimming and accidentally tip and go upside down or side to side. It wants to stay straight up and down. So the dorsal fin on top and the pelvic fin on bottom help do that. Also here on the sides, we have the pectoral fins. And if you have seen the movie Finding Nemo, if you haven't, please go watch it as soon as you're done with this video. Finding Nemo, in that movie, Nemo's lucky fin is his pectoral fin. So the pectoral fin is the one on the side, and the pectoral fin is used for steering, kind of like the wings of an airplane to help the fish move left and right. The fin here on the back, you may call this the tail fin, but remember we're scientists, so we're going to use the scientific term. This is called the caudal fin, and the caudal fin is used kind of like the motor for the fish. It's what helps it gets its speed and move forward. And like we talked about before, the fish will move its caudal fin side to side, whereas a marine mammal will move its caudal fin up and down to move forward. The last fin is here on the back, kind of towards the base of the fish. This is called the anal fin, and it serves a very important purpose because there's no toilet paper in the ocean, and even if there was, it would probably get pretty soggy. So the fish uses the anal fin when it uses the bathroom to get its waste away from it, because you don't want to be swimming around in the restroom. So for some of you guys, I know that words help you a little bit more, seeing these words actually written out. So here's a little diagram of the different parts of the fish. I am a scientist, I'm not an artist, so thank you for your grace. I know that a lot of these words might be the first time you're ever seeing them or hearing them. I think the best way to remember new words or new concepts is to sing about them. So if you hang tight for just a few moments, I promise I will show you a quick and easy way to remember the body parts of the fish that we have here on this board. But I think now is as good a time as ever. We're actually going to head out and see if we can catch some fish in our seine net. So we're going to head over here where Alden and Katie are waiting with a seining net for us and see what they can catch. Hey guys.
We're going to be doing a quick pull of our net to see what we can catch.
Alden, would you like to restate that? I don't think we can hear you yet.
Okay, we're going to be doing a quick pull with our net. Miss Katie is going to be walking in a big semicircle. I'm going to be holding this pole solid, and we're going to pull our net that into shore and see if we caught any fish. Hopefully we'll get a bunch of cool stuff.
Nice job. So you can see that they're keeping that net nice and tight. And that's to make sure that we don't get any fish or don't miss any fish. We maximize the amount of water that the net touches. Awesome. They're coming back around. Looks good, you guys. Important thing when you're seining is making sure that those poles don't come up off the bottom of the ground, because we don't want to accidentally miss any fish. So they did a really good job of keeping those poles on the ground. So we've got a lot of fish, but we've also got something pretty cool. And I don't know if you can see this. He's pretty tiny. This is not a fish, but this is one of the most popular animals in the ocean because we like to eat them. This is a shrimp. He's not big enough to eat yet. Ooh, we've got a trunkfish, right? Filefish. A plain head filefish. Whoop. He's tiny.
Alyssa, can we see the shrimp again?
Yeah.
I don't think we got it good.
So one thing you'll notice about most of the fish that we catch here is that they're very small. And that's because this estuary is what we call a nursery ecosystem. And so a nursery ecosystem, the word nursery probably makes you think of babies. It's a place where young animals kind of feel safe. It's sort of enclosed, so it's safe from the big waves and currents in the ocean, but it's also safe from a lot of the large predators that are gonna be out in the ocean, because the water here is not as salty as it would be out in the ocean. So larger predators like big fish and even lots of species of sharks do not come this far in because they need that really salty water. I'm gonna put these guys in here. What else we got? So over here, I want to make sure that these guys get some water. So I'm holding one animal right here in my hands. This is a spot or a croaker. The reason that they're called croaker, now this guy's kind of small, so he's probably not doing it quite yet, but once they get older, when you actually hold them, they croak, kind of like a frog. You can actually feel that croaking, that vibration when you hold them.
So can you rotate him?
Yeah.
There you go.
So one thing I really want to point out on this guy is it's very easy to see one of those characteristics that we talked about, his lateral line, right here. There he goes. Another animal in here that we did talk about briefly is the jelly. So this is a Cannonball Jelly. It's totally harmless, so you can see that it's safe for me to be holding. It's one of the very few species of jelly that has no sting, or if it does, it doesn't affect humans at all. When you find these on the beach, you're more than welcome to pick them up. They're safe to touch, but always be on the lookout, because what happens a lot of time is inside of the cover of the jelly, which is called the bell, you can often find spider crabs. So they actually live inside, and they are using that jelly for protection and for a home. We've got a silver side right here. A silver side right here. And it's pretty easy to see why we call him a silver side. Scientists aren't super creative a lot of the times when it comes to naming the animals. So right here, down the side, he's got a nice silver stripe. He's a silver side. I like to see an anchovy, but I don't. I'm not finding too many in here. That's okay. Oh. Hold it.
Yep.
What is this?
So that is a juvenile bluefish. These guys, when they get bigger, get really large, sharp teeth. They can get to be 3 or 4 feet long. Those are really big. Normally they're only about a foot or 2 long, but they are really voracious predators. When they get really big, these guys will eat all of the little fish that we caught today, and they are quite good at it. You can find them sometimes if you're watching the ocean, because you'll see a bunch of activity on the surface, a bunch of thrashing fins and an oil slick. and that's from them going after bait fish and just chewing them up. Really cool fish.
Thank you, Alden. Did we want to do another pull? I think we're good.
Whatever you guys want to do is fine.
You guys want to do one more pull?
One more pull?
One more pull!
Woo!
Yeah. Yes. So we showed you guys the silver sides, and one animal that can get pretty confused with the silver side is this little guy right here, because he does look very similar to the silver side. Can you see him?
Step back. Yeah, we got
But this is actually an anchovy. His eyes are a little bigger. His head is shaped slightly different. And one really cool thing about anchovies is that they are filter feeders, which means they open up their mouth wide, they move through the water, and they actually use their gills not only to breathe, but to collect food. So you can see
Oh, we went into the shade. There we go.
he opens his mouth wide. He's got a huge mouth. And this is not what the mouth of a silver side looks like. So if you feel comfortable checking out the mouth of a fish to see if it's a silver side or an anchovy, this is an easy way. All right, I'm gonna put this little guy in the water. All right, thank you guys. We've attracted the gulls, which usually happens when you're catching lots and lots of fish. It's like free lunch. All right, well, as promised, we talked about a lot of those words: dorsal, pectoral, caudal, lateral line, operculum, all these crazy words that you might be hearing for the very first time. But, as promised, I have a song for you to help you remember these words. So if you know the song, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and you already know the tune of this song, I will teach you the hand motions as well. It's pretty easy. It goes like this: dorsal, pectoral, pelvic, caudal, pelvic, caudal. Dorsal, pectoral, pelvic, caudal, pelvic, caudal. Lateral line, operculum and gills. Dorsal, pectoral, pelvic, caudal, pelvic, caudal. And don't forget the English language. Alright guys, that's about all we have for you today. Please remember, if you have questions, you're more than welcome to post those questions in the comments. Tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. we're going to have a follow-up video so we can answer all of those questions for you. And be sure to check the St. Christopher Facebook page because we're going to be posting our schedules for our classes that we'll be teaching live. We're really glad that you guys tuned in to join us this morning, and we will see you next time. Everybody have an awesome day.